Chapter 1. The bride price. The carriage wheels ground over wet cobblestone, each rotation counting down the minutes until Ilara's life ceased to belong to her. She sat rigid against the velvet cushions, her wedding dress, if it could be called, that scratching against her collarbone. The seamstress had worked through 3 nights to finish it. Black silk with silver threading that caught the moonlight like spider webs. Her mother had wept when she saw it. Black for mourning, not celebration. They all knew what this was. A sacrifice dressed up as matrimony. Through the rain-streaked window, the city of Ashmere fell away behind them. Gas lamps flickered and died as they climbed higher into the hills, where the old families kept their estates, those who could afford to live far from the crowded, desperate streets below. But they weren't going to any ordinary estate. They were going to Blackthorn Hall. Ilara's fingers twisted in her lap, nails biting crescents into her palms. She wanted to feel afraid. Fear would be simpler than this hollow resignation that had settled into her bones 3 weeks ago, when her father came home with that terrible look on his face. "The debt has been called," he'd said, voice breaking. "Everything, the house, the business, your dowry, it's all forfeit. We'll be on the streets by month's end unless." He couldn't finish. He didn't need to. House Blackthorn held the note, and House Blackthorn wanted payment in blood. Specifically, in her blood. The carriage lurched over a pothole, and Ilara's maid, Margaret, reached out to steady her. The older woman's eyes were red-rimmed, her hand trembling. She'd been with Ilara's family since Ilara was a child. Now she was the only witness they could afford to send. Miss Margaret whispered, "You don't have to do this. We could turn back. We could run where?" Ilara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "With what money? And when they hunt us down and they will, what happens to my parents, to my sister?" Margaret's face crumpled, but she said nothing more. The truth was simple and brutal. House Blackthorn didn't make idle threats. They were one of the oldest vampire houses in the territory, bound by blood oaths that predated the city itself. They'd ruled Ashmere's shadows for 300 years. They owned half the merchant guilds, a quarter of the docklands, and every judge in the high court. When they demanded payment, you paid, or you disappeared. Ilara's father had borrowed heavily to expand his shipping business, betting on routes that would make them wealthy. Instead, a storm had taken 3 ships and most of his fortune. The loan, negotiated through intermediaries, signed in the desperate hope of one good season, had come due. House Blackthorn wasn't interested in silver anymore. They wanted an alliance, a contract, a human bride for their reclusive lord. Ilara had heard the stories, same as everyone in Ashmere. Lord Kaelan Blackthorn, the Wraith King. The vampire so old he remembered when this land had another name. He'd fought in the Blood Wars 50 years ago, before the Great Treaty bound the houses to peace. They said he'd killed hundreds. They said his eyes were empty as winter frost, that he fed without mercy, that humans who entered Blackthorn Hall didn't leave. They also said he hadn't been seen in public in over a decade. Whatever he'd become in his isolation, Ilara was about to marry it. The carriage turned through iron gates, tall and spiked and wreathed in fog. Beyond them, the hall rose against a storm-docked sky, a sprawling Gothic mansion of blackened stone and pointed towers. Candlelight flickered behind stained-glass windows. The architecture was ancient, beautiful in the way ruined churches were beautiful, cold and austere, and utterly indifferent to human comfort. Ilara's breath fogged the glass. The carriage stopped. For a moment, neither she nor Margaret moved. The rain hammered down harder, as if the sky itself were trying to warn her away. Then the door opened. A pale hand extended into the carriage, gloved in black leather, elegant and motionless. "Miss Thorne," a smooth voice said, "welcome to Blackthorn Hall." Ilara looked up into the face of a woman who could have been 30 or 300. Porcelain skin, dark hair pinned severely back, eyes like polished onyx. A vampire. Obviously, she wore a high-collared gown in deep crimson, and regarded Ilara with the clinical interest of someone appraising livestock. Ilara took the offered hand and stepped down into the rain. The woman didn't flinch as water soaked her shoulders. "I am Seraphine House Steward. Lord Blackthorn is expecting you." "Is he?" Ilara said flatly. Seraphine's lips curved, not quite a smile. "The ceremony will take place within the hour. You'll want to prepare." "Prepare how? I'm already dressed." "There are traditions." Seraphine's gaze flicked to the black dress, and something unreadable passed across her face. "You'll need to sign the contract, in blood, naturally, and Lord Blackthorn will require proof of your consent." Ilara's stomach turned. "Consent? House law," Seraphine said crisply. "No human may be bound without witnessed agreement. It's barbaric otherwise." The irony wasn't lost on Ilara. She was being sold to pay her father's debt, but vampire law required her to smile and sign her name while doing it. Margaret stumbled out of the carriage, clutching Ilra's small traveling case. She looked up at the hall and went even paler. "Come," Seraphine said, already turning toward the towering front doors. "The Lord doesn't like to be kept waiting." Ilara followed, because there was nothing else to do. The doors opened on silent hinges. Inside, Blackthorn Hall was a cathedral of shadows. Chapter 2. The Wraith King. The great hall stretched before them like the belly of some vast stone beast. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into darkness overhead, supported by columns carved with twisting vines and thorns. Candelabras lined the walls, their flames casting more shadow than light. The floor was polished, black marble, reflecting everything in ghostly duplicate. At the far end, on a dais of 3 shallow steps, stood a single throne, and in that throne sat Lord Kaelan Blackthorn. Ilara's breath caught. She'd expected a monster, something twisted by centuries, something visibly cruel. Instead, the man watching her approach could have been carved from the same cold marble as his hall. He was tall, she could tell, even seated, with sharp, aristocratic features that might have been handsome if they held any warmth at all. His hair was black as ink, falling just past his collar. He wore a tailored coat of midnight blue over a crisp white shirt, every line immaculate, but it was his eyes that stopped her. Silver, not gray, not pale blue, silver, like mercury or moonlight on water, and utterly, completely empty. Those eyes tracked her across the hall with the precision of a predator assessing prey. Seraphine stopped 10 paces from the dais and curtsied low. "My lord, Miss Ilara Thorn," as agreed. Kaelan said nothing. He simply stared at Ilara, unblinking, until the silence stretched so thin she thought it might snap. Then, finally, "You're younger than I expected." His voice was low, measured, and held the faint accent of old nobility, the kind that came from centuries of speaking a language that no longer existed. Ilara lifted her chin. "I'm 19, old enough to sign a contract, apparently." Something flickered across his expression, not quite amusement, not quite irritation, and willing. "Does it matter?" "Yes." The word was flat, absolute. "House law requires consent. I won't bind you otherwise." "How generous," Ilara said, bitterness bleeding through. "My family loses everything, and I get to choose between destitution and this. What a wealth of options." Kaelan leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the throne's arms. The candlelight caught the sharp planes of his face. "Do you want to leave?" Ilara froze. Behind her, Margaret made a small, desperate sound. Kaelan continued, his voice eerily calm. "If you walk out that door, the debt remains. Your father's business will be liquidated. Your family will lose their home, but you'll be free." He paused. "Is that what you want?" It was a test. It had to be, some cruel game to make her beg or break. But when Ilara met those silver eyes, she saw no game there, only cold, patient waiting. "No," she said quietly, "I don't want to leave." "Why?" "Because my sister is 16 and has 2 marriage offers. Because my mother has a weak heart. Because my father already looks like a ghost." Her voice hardened. "Because someone has to pay, and I'd rather it be me than them." Kaelan studied her for a long moment. Then he rose. He moved like water, like shadow, too smooth, too deliberate. Ilara's instincts screamed at her to step back, but she forced herself still as he descended the dais steps. Up close, he was taller than she'd thought, 6 feet at least, maybe more, and cold. She could feel it radiating off him, as if his body remembered nothing of human warmth. "You understand what this contract entails?" he asked. Seraphine produced a scroll from somewhere within her gown and unrolled it on a nearby table. The parchment was old, covered in dense script and symbols Ilara didn't recognize. Kaelan gestured to it. "You'll live here, under my protection, bound to House Blackthorn. In exchange, your family's debt is forgiven, and they receive a yearly stipend enough to live comfortably." His eyes never left hers. "You'll attend house functions as my wife, you'll learn our customs, and when required," he paused. "When required," he continued, voice dropping, "you'll provide blood." There it was, the thing they'd danced around. Elara's pulse hammered in her throat. "How much?" "Enough to sustain me, not enough to harm you." He tilted his head slightly. "I feed once a week. It takes perhaps 20 minutes. You'll be weak for a day after. Nothing more. And if I refuse, then the contract is void." His expression didn't change. "But you won't refuse." "You're not the type," Ilara bristled. "You don't know me. I know you walked through my door in a morning dress to save your family. I know you're standing here asking questions instead of weeping or fainting." Something almost like respect touched his voice. "You're stronger than you look. Miss Thorne. That's why I accepted the arrangement. You accepted? Ilara stared at him. You could have refused the contract. Let my father pay in silver. Silver means nothing to me. I have more than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Kalen moved to the table, producing a small silver knife from his coat. But Alliance's human allies who understand our world, those are valuable. Your family's shipping routes interest me. And you. He met her gaze. You interest me. The words hung in the air, unsettling in their honesty. Ilara approached the table slowly. The contract script was beautiful and incomprehensible. What language is this? Old Covenant tongue. The binding will translate your intent. Kalen offered her the knife. Handle first. 3 drops of blood on your name. Then speak the words Seraphine gives you. Ilara took the blade. It was cold as ice, sharp as regret. She pressed the tip to her thumb. Wait, Kalen said softly. She looked up. His silver eyes held hers. And for the first time, she saw something beneath the emptiness, something old and tired and almost sad. Once you do this, he said, there's no going back. You'll be mine in the eyes of every house in the territory. Protected, yes, but bound. He paused. Are you certain? Ilara thought of her sister's laugh, her mother's garden, her father's broken voice. She pressed the blade down. Blood welled, bright and red. I'm certain, she whispered, and let 3 drops fall. Chapter 3. Blood oats. The blood hit the parchment and didn't spread. Instead, it sank into the paper like water into sand, and the script began to glow. Faint at first, a shimmer of gold that traced each incomprehensible symbol, then brighter, until the entire contract blazed with light that hurt to look at. Ilara gasped and stepped back. But Kalen's hand caught her wrist. His grip was gentle but immovable, his skin cold enough to make her shiver. Don't break contact, he said quietly. The binding needs to recognize you. The light crawled up her arm, like living flame, painless but deeply wrong. As if something foreign were learning the shape of her bones, she wanted to pull away, to run, but Kalen held her steady. Seraphine, he said. The steward stepped forward, her dark eyes reflecting the golden glow. She began to speak in that same ancient language, her voice resonating through the hall like a bell. The words were beautiful and terrible, and Ilara understood none of them yet somehow. Their meaning pressed against her mind. Bond, blood witness, bound. Repeat after me, Seraphine said, switching to common tongue. By blood given freely, by blood given freely, Ilara whispered. I bind myself to House Blackthorn. I bind myself to House Blackthorn, until death or release. Ilara's voice caught, until death or release. The light flared brilliant, then died. The hall plunged back into shadow. Ilara swayed, suddenly dizzy, and Kalen's other hand came up to steady her shoulder. Breathe, he commanded. She did, dragging in air that tasted like metal and old stone. When her vision cleared, the contract had changed. Her name, Ilara Thorne, was written in elegant script at the bottom, though she hadn't touched quill to paper. Below it, 3 crimson drops remained, perfectly preserved, no longer wet but somehow still fresh. And beside her name, Kalen Blackthorn, Lord of the Northern Reach, Keeper of the Old Laws. His signature was already there, written in black ink that seemed to move in the candlelight. It's done, Seraphine said, rolling the parchment carefully. The bond is witnessed and sealed. Congratulations, Lady Blackthorn. Lady Blackthorn. The title felt like a noose. Kalen released her wrist and stepped back, putting proper distance between them. Margaret, he said, and Ilara's maid jumped. Take Lady Blackthorn to the east wing, 3rd floor, the suite overlooking the gardens. See that she has everything she needs. My lord, Margaret stammered, curtsying so low she nearly toppled. Kalen's gaze returned to Ilara. You'll want to rest. The binding takes a toll on mortal bodies. He paused. We'll speak in the evening, when you're awake, you mean. The words slipped out before Ilara could stop them. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those silver eyes. Yes, when I'm awake. He turned toward a door half hidden in shadow. Seraphine will explain the household rules. Follow them, and you'll be safe here. And if I don't, he stopped, his back to her. Then you'll learn why humans fear the dark. The door closed behind him with a sound like a crypt ceiling. Ilara stood there, her thumbs still bleeding sluggishly, and tried to remember how to breathe. The suite was obscenely beautiful. 3 rooms, a sitting area with velvet furniture, and a fireplace large enough to stand in, a bedroom dominated by a canopied bed draped in midnight blue, and a bathing room with a copper tub and running water, actual running water, a luxury Ilara's family home had never afforded, but it was also a cage. The windows were tall and arched, their glass thick and slightly warped with age. Ilara pressed her hand against one, and felt how cold it was. Outside, the gardens stretched into darkness, formal hedges and stone paths disappearing into fog. Somewhere beyond the estate walls, Ashmere glittered with gaslight and life. She'd never felt farther from home. Margaret bustled around the room, unpacking Ilara's meager belongings with shaking hands. "Oh, miss," she kept whispering. "Oh, miss, what have we done?" "Survived," Ilara said tiredly. She sank into a chair by the fire, still wearing the black wedding dress. "We've survived, Margaret, that's all, but he's one of them. A vampire, miss, a killer. So are half the lords in the territory." Ilara closed her eyes. "At least this one follows his laws." A soft knock interrupted them. Seraphine entered without waiting for permission, carrying a silver tray laden with food, bread, cheese, cold meat, fruit, and a glass of dark red wine. "You should eat," the steward said, setting the tray on a low table. "The binding depletes mortal energy. You'll feel weak for a few hours." Ilara's stomach growled traitorously. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. "Thank you." Seraphine's dark eyes studied her. "You did well. Many humans faint during the ceremony, or weep. Would it have mattered if I had? To the binding, no. To Lord Blackthorn." Seraphine's lips curved slightly. "Perhaps." Ilara reached for the bread. "He said you'd explain the household rules." "Simple enough. Don't enter the West Wing, that's Lord Blackthorn's private quarters. Don't wander the lower levels after dark without an escort. Don't invite anyone onto the grounds without permission." Seraphine ticked them off on her fingers. "And never, ever open the door to the wine cellar." "Why?" "Because that's where we keep the ones who broke the other rules." The bread turned to ash in Ilara's mouth. Seraphine's expression remained pleasant. "There are 6 other vampires in residence, myself, Lord Blackthorn, and 4 guards who rotate shifts. We don't feed from unwilling humans. We don't hunt within city limits. And we don't tolerate threats to our house." She leaned forward slightly. "You're part of that house now, Lady Blackthorn, which means you're protected, but it also means you're bound by our laws. What happens if I break them? That depends on the severity." Seraphine straightened. "But I'd advise against testing Lord Blackthorn's patience. He's been volatile lately." Ilara's pulse quickened. "Volatile how?" "He hasn't fed properly in 3 months. He's been refusing his usual arrangements." Seraphine's gaze turned calculating. "You're the first human he's allowed close since, well, in a very long time." "What?" "You'd have to ask him, if he's in a mood to answer." Seraphine moved toward the door. "Rest, my lady. Evening comes quickly here, and Lord Blackthorn will want to speak with you about expectations." She left, closing the door with a soft click. Margaret immediately rushed to Ilara's side. "Miss, we have to leave. We have to find a way." "There is no way," Ilara said quietly. She looked down at her thumb, where the binding had left a faint silver mark, like a scar that had healed in seconds. "I'm his now, Margaret. For better or worse." Outside, the sun began its descent, and somewhere in the West Wing, something ancient stirred awake. Chapter 4. Nocturnal arrangements. Sel awoke to darkness, and the certainty that she wasn't alone. She'd fallen asleep in the chair by the fire, exhausted from the binding ceremony. Now the flames had died to embers, and the room was filled with that particular quality of silence that comes just after sunset, the kind of silence that holds its breath. Someone was watching her. She opened her eyes slowly and found Kalen standing by the window, perfectly still, his silver gaze fixed on something in the gardens below. He'd changed clothes now, wearing a simple black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing pale forearms traced with old scars. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it. He looked almost human. Then he turned, and the illusion shattered. His eyes caught the dim light like an animal's, reflecting it back in an eerie, colorless gleam. No human eyes did that. "You sleep poorly," he observed. Ilara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "You watch people sleep. I'd say we're both unsettling." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Fair enough." He moved away from the window with that unnatural grace, settling into the chair opposite hers. "Margaret went to the kitchens for your dinner. I thought we should talk privately." "About what?" "The feeding schedule." Ilara couldn't quite keep the bitterness out. Among other things, Kalen leaned back, studying her with unsettling intensity. "You're angry. I'm exhausted. There's a difference. You're both tilted his head slightly. You're also afraid, though you hide it well, and you're wondering if I'm going to hurt you." Ilara's breath caught. "Are you?" "No." The word was simple, absolute. "I don't take pleasure in causing pain, Ilara. Despite what the stories say." It was the first time he'd used her given name. Hearing it in his low, accented voice sent an involuntary shiver through her. Then, why am I here? She asked. You could have any human in Ashmere. Why buy a bride through a debt contract? Kalen was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, because most humans come to me for money, or power, or the promise of immortality. They want something. His silver eyes met hers. You didn't want anything except to save your family. That's rare. So I'm here because I'm desperate. You're here because you're selfless. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how few people I've met in 300 years who would genuinely sacrifice themselves for others, who wouldn't at least try to negotiate for personal gain? He paused. When your father's intermediary approached me, I read the entire file. I know about your sister's medical treatments that you paid for by selling your mother's jewelry. I know you work at the lending library for a fraction of what you're worth, because the owner is elderly and can't afford better help. I know you gave your dowry to your cousin when her husband abandoned her. Ilara stared at him. You investigated me thoroughly. No apology in his tone. I don't bind myself to strangers, even through marriage contracts. I needed to know who you were, and what did you decide? That you're exactly what I need. He rose, moving to the fireplace. With a gesture, flames sprang to life, as if responding to his will alone. House Blackthorn has many enemies. Ilara, other vampire houses, who want our territory, our resources, our influence. They watch for weaknesses, and for a century, I've given them none. By staying isolated, Ilara said slowly, by refusing to take a companion. Yes. He stared into the flames, but isolation has its own cost. The other houses interpret it as fear or weakness. They're starting to test our borders, push against our agreements. He trailed off, as if the words were difficult. I need to appear stable, connected to the human world. A vampire lord with a human wife sends a message. I'm not hiding, I'm not afraid, and I value the treaty between our kinds. Understanding dawned cold and clear. I'm political theater, your statement. He turned back to her. And protection. Human spouses are sacrosanct under house law. No vampire can harm you without declaring blood war against me, which means you're safer here than you'd be anywhere in Ashmere. How comforting, Ilara said dryly. I'm a symbol and a shield. You're also a person. Kalen's voice dropped. Which is why I need you to understand the rules. Not house rules. Seraphine handled those. My rules. Ilara waited, pulse quickening. First, I won't feed from you without asking. Every time. No exceptions. He counted off on his fingers. Second, your rooms are yours. I won't enter without permission. Third, you're free to go anywhere on the estate grounds during the day. At night, stay in the main house, unless I'm with you. Why? Because the woods belong to something older than me, and it doesn't respect house law. His expression darkened. There are things in these hills that predate the treaty, things that would find you appetizing. Ilara's mouth went dry. You're saying there are worse things than vampires. Much worse. Kalen moved closer, his gaze intense. Which brings me to the fourth rule. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to stay silent, you don't make a sound. Do you understand? You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to keep you alive. He stopped directly in front of her chair, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're under my protection now, Ilara. That means I'm responsible for you, and I take my responsibilities seriously. Even when they're bought with debt. Something passed across his face too quick to name, but it looked almost like pain, especially then. The fire crackled. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. Ilara took a breath. When do you need to feed? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Kalen's jaw tightened. 3 days, but we can wait longer if you need time to adjust. And if we wait too long, then I become dangerous. His voice went flat, emotionless. Vampires who starve lose control. They hunt. They kill. I won't let myself reach that point. So 3 days, Ilara said quietly. What do I need to know? He studied her for a long moment. It won't hurt. I'll make certain of that. You'll feel dizzy afterward, tired for about a day. Seraphine will bring you iron supplements and red meat. It helps with recovery. He hesitated. Some humans find the experience pleasant. The venom has euphoric properties. Ilara's face heated. I see. I'm telling you so, you're not surprised. His expression remained carefully neutral. Consent matters, Ilara, in everything. If you're uncomfortable, we stop, always. She wanted to hate him for his clinical detachment, for treating this like a business arrangement. But there was something in his voice, a careful gentleness, as if he were trying very hard not to frighten her. as if he actually cared. 3 days, she repeated. I'll be ready. Kaelin nodded once, then turned toward the door. Margaret will return soon with your dinner. Try to eat, even if you're not hungry. The binding weakens mortals, Kaelin. He stopped, surprised. It was the first time she'd used his name. What do you get from this? She asked. Really, he was silent for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, perhaps a reason to remember what it feels like to be human. The door closed behind him, leaving Ilara alone with the fire and her racing thoughts. Chapter 5. Day and night. Lara woke to sunlight streaming through the tall windows, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The contract, the binding, the vampire lord, who now owned her by law, if not by choice. She sat up slowly, her body aching as if she'd run for miles. The blood oath had left her depleted in ways she hadn't anticipated. Margaret was already moving about the room, laying out a simple day dress in deep green. You slept 12 hours, miss, she said softly. Seraphine said that's normal, after a binding. Ilara touched her thumb, where the silver mark from the ceremony gleamed faintly in the morning light. It didn't hurt, but it felt strange, like wearing a ring she couldn't remove. Is Lord Blackthorn asleep? She asked. Dead to the world, miss, begging your pardon for saying it that way. Margaret helped her into the dress. Seraphine says the vampires sleep deep during the day. Nothing wakes them. It's like death, she says, except they come back at sunset. The thought was deeply unsettling. Somewhere in the West Wing, Kaelin lay motionless as a corpse, waiting for darkness to revive him. Ilara pushed the image away. I want to see the estate, all of it. Margaret paled. Miss, the rules said I could go anywhere on the grounds during the day. Ilara fastened the last button on her dress. That's what I intend to do. Blackthorn Hall was even more impressive in daylight. The main house was a Gothic masterpiece of black stone and stained glass, its towers reaching toward the sky like accusations, but the grounds were what took Ilara's breath away. Formal gardens with geometric hedges, a maze of white roses, a conservatory with a glass dome, and beyond it all, the woods dark and thick and ancient. She walked the gardens first, Margaret trailing nervously behind. The roses were in full bloom despite the late season, their scent heavy and sweet. Everything was maintained to perfection, though Ilara saw no gardeners, no servants, except Margaret and the silent staff who brought meals and disappeared like ghosts. Who takes care of all this? She asked. Margaret shook her head. I don't know, miss. I haven't seen anyone, but everything's always perfect, isn't it? Like magic, or like vampires who worked through the night while the world slept. Ilara found herself drawn to the library, a vast room on the second floor with floor-to-ceiling shelves and rolling ladders. The books were old, some ancient, their spines cracked with age. She ran her fingers along them reverently. Philosophy, history, poetry, in half a dozen languages, and vampire lore. She pulled down a leather-bound volume titled The Covenant of Houses. Inside, dense script detailed the laws that governed vampire society. The Treaty of 1776, which ended the blood wars and established territories. The feeding protocols, which forbade hunting unwilling humans. The marriage laws, which required human consent for any binding. Ilara flipped to a chapter on blood bonds. Her eyes widened as she read. A bond formed through blood oath creates a connection between vampire and human that transcends mere contract. The vampire can sense the human's location, their fear, their pain. In turn, the human becomes resistant to other vampires' influence. They cannot be compelled, fed from, or harmed without the bonded vampire's explicit permission. This protection is absolute and extends to the human's immediate family. That was why Kaelin had needed the ceremony. Not just for appearances, the bond itself protected her and her family from other houses. It was strategic, yes, but also considerate. She kept reading. The bond can only be broken by mutual consent or death. Attempting to harm one's bonded partner results in immediate physical backlash. The vampire experiences the human's pain tenfold. This ensures the human's safety. The vampires bound by self-preservation to protect them. Ilara closed the book slowly, her mind racing. Kaelin couldn't hurt her even if he wanted to. The bond wouldn't allow it, which meant his careful rules, his talk of consent. It wasn't just honor, it was survival. Miss Margaret stood in the doorway. It's past noon. You should eat something. Ilara nodded absently, replacing the book, but her mind stayed on what she'd learned. She found the conservatory in the afternoon. The glass dome soared overhead, trapping warmth and light. Inside, exotic plants grew in wild profusion. Orchids, night-blooming jasmine, flowers, Ilara had no names for it. The air was humid and thick with perfume. And in the center, on a stone bench, sat a man. He was young, perhaps 20, with sandy hair and a scattering of freckles across his nose. Human. He looked up when Ilara entered, his expression startled. "Oh," he said, "you're the new lady of the house." Ilara approached cautiously. "And you are Thomas." He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "I tend the conservatory. And before you ask, yes, I'm human. Yes, I work for vampires. And no, I'm not a prisoner." His directness was refreshing. "Why do you stay?" Thomas shrugged. "Pays well. Lord Blackthorn lets me experiment with rare plants. And honestly, it's safer here than in Ashmere. You know what happens to young men in the factory districts." His expression darkened. "This way, I have a future. And the feeding. Once a month, one of the guards needs a donation. I volunteer, get a bonus for it and a day off after." He tilted his head, studying her. "You're different from what I expected. The stories made you sound like some tragic damsel." "What stories?" "The staff talk. They say you offered yourself to save your family, that you didn't even try to negotiate." Thomas's voice softened. "That takes courage. Or desperation," Ilara said quietly. "Maybe both." He gestured to the plants around them. "But you're here now. Might as well make the best of it. Lord Blackthorn's not cruel, you know. Distant, yes. Cold, but not cruel. He follows the old codes strictly. Have you met him?" "A few times, usually when he walks the grounds at night." Thomas's expression turned thoughtful. "He's lonely, I think. All that power, all those years, and no one to share it with. Must be exhausting." The observation surprised Ilara. She'd thought of Kalen as many things dangerous, calculating, inhuman but not lonely. "Thank you, Thomas," she said. "For what?" "For reminding me he's not just a monster from a story." Thomas smiled. "None of us are just one thing, my lady." Ilara returned to her rooms as the sun began its descent. She stood at the window, watching shadows lengthen across the gardens. Somewhere in the west wing, Kalen would be waking, opening those silver eyes to darkness, rising to face another endless night. The thought made her chest tighten with something she didn't want to name. She'd come here expecting a prison, but Blackthorn Hall was more complicated than that. The staff were willing, the grounds were beautiful, and Kalen was a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. A knock sounded at her door. Seraphine entered, carrying a dark blue gown over her arm. "For tonight," she said, "Lord Blackthorn requests your presence at dinner. He has questions." "Questions about what?" Seraphine's dark eyes glittered. "About you, Lady Blackthorn. He wants to know who you are. And more importantly," she smiled slightly, "he wants to know if you're afraid of him." Ilara lifted her chin. "Tell him, I'll join him shortly. He'll be pleased to hear it." Seraphine laid the gown on the bed. "One piece of advice, my lady. Vampires respect honesty above all else. Don't tell Lord Blackthorn what you think he wants to hear. Tell him the truth, even if the truth is ugly, especially if the truth is ugly." Seraphine moved toward the door. "He's had 3 centuries of people lying to him. Be different." The door closed. Ilara looked down at the gown, midnight blue, silk with silver threading, far finer than anything she'd ever owned. She touched the fabric, then looked at her reflection in the window. A girl in borrowed finery, bound to a vampire lord, standing at the edge of something she didn't understand. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Chapter 6. The first meal. The dining room was smaller than Ilara almost. A single table of dark wood stretched beneath a chandelier, whose crystals caught the candlelight and scattered it like stars. 2 place settings sat opposite each other. Fine china, silver cutlery, crystal glasses. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women in clothing from centuries past. All of them had the same cold, beautiful features. All of them had silver eyes. Kalen stood by the window, his back to her. He'd dressed formally, a tailored black suit with a deep blue waistcoat that matched her gown exactly. His hair was tied back, revealing the sharp line of his jaw. He turned when she entered, and something flickered across his expression. "You look well," he said quietly. "The gown suits you." "You chose it," Ilara replied, moving to the table. "I chose the color. Seraphine chose the style." He pulled out her chair with old-world courtesy. "I'm told I have no taste in women's fashion." "Told by whom?" Seraphine repeatedly, "Over the last 80 years. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "She's convinced I'd dress everyone in black if left to my own devices." It was the first trace of humor she'd heard from him. Ilara found herself almost smiling as she sat. Kalen took his seat across from her. A servant, one of the silent staff, appeared from nowhere, pouring wine for Ilara. and filling Kalen's glass with something darker, thicker, blood, undoubtedly. The servant vanished as quickly as they'd come. You explored the estate today, Kalen said. It wasn't a question. I did. I met Thomas. He tends your conservatory. Ah. Kalen lifted his glass, but didn't drink. What did you think of him? That he's here by choice. That surprised me. Why, did you think I kept slaves? His voice was mild, but there was an edge beneath it. Ilara met his gaze steadily. I thought you might. The stories about vampires are mostly lies told by humans who fear what they don't understand. He set the glass down with controlled precision. I follow the covenant, Ilara. Every vampire in my house does. We don't hunt unwilling prey. We don't turn humans without consent. We don't keep thralls or prisoners. He paused. We're not monsters, regardless of what your priests preach. Then what are you? The question hung in the air between them. Kalen was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those unsettling silver eyes. Finally, survivors. We're survivors of a world that tried to exterminate us, who learned to adapt or die. We made laws to govern ourselves, treaties to coexist with humanity. We became civilized. His expression hardened, but civilization is a thin veneer. Beneath it, we're still predators, and you should never forget that. Is that a warning? It's a truth. He leaned forward slightly. You asked me yesterday what I get from this arrangement. I'll give you a fuller answer. I get a companion who sees me as I am, not the stories, not the legends me. His voice dropped. Do you know how rare that is? To be known? Ilara's breath caught. There was something raw in his voice, something that sounded almost like longing. The servant returned with the first course, roasted vegetables for Ilara, nothing for Kalen. He watched her eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. Your turn, he said quietly. What do you want from this, Ilara? Beyond saving your family. She considered lying, but Seraphine's advice echoed in her mind. Tell him the truth. I want to understand, she said finally. I spent 19 years believing vampires were evil. Then I walked into this house and found order, beauty, Thomas tending his plants, Seraphine who's sharp but not cruel, you, who won't feed without asking. She set down her fork. Nothing here matches what I was taught. So yes, I want to understand what's true and what's propaganda. Kalen's expression shifted something almost like respect. Ask me anything. Do you regret becoming what you are? His pause was longer this time. Every day, he said quietly. And never. He reached for his glass, finally taking a sip of the dark liquid. I was 26 when I was turned, dying of a fever that would have killed me within hours. A vampire offered me a choice. Death or transformation. I chose survival. His silver eyes met hers. I've had 3 centuries since then. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched humanity grow from superstition into science. I've read every book worth reading, traveled to places that no longer exist. His voice softened. But I've also watched everyone I loved grow old and die. I've buried 3 human women who chose mortality over the transformation. I've seen wars that devastated both our kinds. I've been hunted, feared, and hated simply for existing. 3 wives, Ilara whispered. The number struck her. What happened to them? They lived full lives and died peacefully, surrounded by children and grandchildren. I couldn't give them. Pain flickered across his face. That's the curse. Ilara, we can love, but we can't grow old together. We watch you bloom and fade while we remain frozen. It's why many vampires eventually stop taking human companions. The grief becomes unbearable. Then why did you agree to this contract? Because loneliness is worse than grief. His voice was barely above a whisper. At least grief means you had something worth losing. The raw honesty of it stole Ilara's breath. She'd expected coldness, calculation, not this aching vulnerability. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it. Don't be. Kalen straightened, his mask of composure sliding back into place. I made my choices. I live with them. He gestured to her plate. Eat, you need your strength. They finished the meal in silence, but it was different now, less awkward, more contemplative, as if they'd crossed some invisible threshold and found themselves in new territory. When the plates were cleared, Kalen rose and offered his hand. Walk with me. Ilara hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His skin was cold but not unpleasant. Steady. He led her through corridors she hadn't seen before, past rooms full of curiosities, ancient weapons, maps of lands that no longer existed, a gallery of paintings so old they'd faded to ghostly suggestions of color. This is my history, he said, gesturing to the collection. Everything I've been, everywhere I've traveled, it's all here, gathering dust. It's beautiful, Ilara said honestly. Lonely, but beautiful. Yes. He stopped before a portrait of a young man with dark hair and warm brown eyes, human eyes. That was me. Before. Ilara studied the painting. The man looked happy, vital, full of life, nothing like the cold creature standing beside her. Do you miss him? She asked softly. Sometimes Kalen's reflection appeared in the portrait's glass, silver eyes ghostly against the painted brown ones. He had hope. I have only memory. Ilara turned to face him fully. Then, perhaps I can help you remember what hope feels like. The words surprised them both. Kalen stared at her, something unreadable in his expression. For a moment, she thought he might pull away, retreat behind his walls. Instead, he lifted her hand, the one he still held, and pressed it briefly to his chest. Where a heartbeat should have been, there was only stillness. 3 days, he said quietly. In 3 days I'll need to feed. Can you do this, Ella? Can you give me that? She thought of the blood oath, the silver mark on her thumb, the way his loneliness echoed something broken in herself. Yes, she whispered. I can do this. His eyes closed briefly, as if in relief. Then let me show you something. He led her up a spiral staircase to the highest tower. The door at the top opened onto a circular room made entirely of glass, and beyond it, the world Ashmere spread below them like a carpet of lights, the river a silver ribbon through the darkness, the stars wheeled overhead, brilliant and cold. I come here to remember, Kalen said, that the world is larger than my grief, that beauty still exists, even if I can't fully feel it anymore. Ilara stepped to the glass, pressing her palm against it. The city looked so small from here, her old life, her old fears, all of it, distant and fading. Thank you, she said, for showing me this. Thank you, he replied, for being here to see it. They stood together in silence, watching the night, and neither of them felt quite so alone. Chapter 7. Defeating the 3 days passed faster than Ilara expected. She spent her mornings exploring the estate, her afternoons in the library, and her evenings with Kalen. They fell into a rhythm, dinner conversations that stretched into hours. Walks through moonlit gardens, quiet moments in the glass tower watching the city below. He told her about the blood wars, about vampire politics, about the delicate balance that kept their world from descending into chaos. And she told him about her life before, the lending library where she'd worked, her sister's laugh, the way her mother's garden smelled after rain. It was almost easy to forget what was coming, until the morning of the 3rd day, when Seraphine appeared at her door with a silver tray. Iron supplements, the steward said, setting down pills and a glass of fortified wine. Take them now, they'll help with recovery. Her dark eyes were serious. Lord Blackthorn asks if you're still willing. If you've changed your mind, he'll make other arrangements. Ilara's pulse quickened, but her voice was steady. I haven't changed my mind. Then he'll come to you after sunset, in your sitting room, not the bedroom. He was quite insistent about that. Seraphine paused at the door. He's trying to make this easier for you, my lady. Many vampires wouldn't bother with such consideration. After she left, Ilara stood at the window, watching clouds gather over the distant hills. Her thumb traced the silver mark from the blood, both a constant reminder of what she'd become: property, protection, partner. She wasn't sure which frightened her more. Sunset came with agonizing slowness. Ilara dressed carefully, in a simple gown of deep burgundy. The color seemed appropriate. Somehow, Margaret fussed over her hair until Ilara gently dismissed her, needing to be alone with her thoughts. The sitting room fire had been built up to a roaring blaze. Someone, Seraphine, probably had left a decanter of brandy and 2 glasses on the side table. Ilara poured herself a measure with shaking hands and drank it too quickly, gasping at the burn. You can do this. It's just blood. People donate blood all the time. But this wasn't a sterile clinic with nurses and needles. This was a vampire who would put his mouth on her skin and drink from her vein. A soft knock made her jump. Come in, she said. Surprised, her voice didn't waver. Kalen entered quietly, closing the door behind him. He'd dressed down, just a simple white shirt and dark trousers, his hair loose around his shoulders. Somehow, the casual dress made him seem more dangerous, not less. More real. His silver eyes found hers immediately. How are you feeling? Terrified, she admitted, but ready? Something like pain crossed his face. I could still make other arrangements. No. Ilara set down her glass with more force than necessary. I gave you my word. I won't break it just because I'm nervous. He studied her for a long moment, then moved to the settee and sat, leaving space beside him. Come here. Ilara's legs felt unsteady as she crossed the room and sat, careful to maintain a few inches of distance. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped his knees. He was nervous too. The realization steadied her somehow. How do we do this? She asked. First, I need your explicit consent, not the contract, your consent, spoken aloud. His voice was carefully controlled. Do I have permission to feed from you, Ella? She took a breath. Yes. Are you certain? There's no shame in refusing. I'm certain. He nodded slowly. The wrist is easiest, less intimate than the throat, and you won't have to watch. I'll be as quick as I can. He held out his hand, palm up. May I? Elara placed her hand in his, fighting the urge to pull away. His skin was cold, his grip gentle. It will hurt for a moment when I bite, he said quietly. Then the venom will take effect and the pain will stop. You'll feel dizzy, possibly euphoric. Some humans describe it as floating. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, just above her pulse. If it becomes too much, if you want me to stop, say my name. I'll hear you, I promise. Kaylin, she whispered, testing the weight of it. His eyes closed briefly. Yes, like that. He brought her wrist to his mouth, his breath cool against her skin. For a moment, he just held it there, as if gathering courage. Then he bit. Elara gasped at the sharp pain like needle pricks, precise and burning. But before she could cry out, warmth flooded through her veins, thick and honey. The pain dissolved into something else entirely. The room seemed to tilt and steady, all at once. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, then slowed to a languorous rhythm. Kaylin's mouth moved against her wrists, and she felt each pull of his lips like a tide drawing something essential from her, but not violently, almost tenderly. She understood now why humans volunteered for this, why Thomas spoke of it so casually. It felt like falling asleep in warm water, like wine in starlight and surrender. Her free hand reached out without conscious thought, fingers threading into Kaylin's hair. The strands were cool and surprisingly soft. He made a sound low in his throat, not quite a groan, but closed his grip on her wrist, tightened fractionally. Time became elastic. She couldn't tell if seconds or hours had passed. Then, gently, he pulled away. Elara made a small sound of protest, and his eyes snapped to hers, no longer silver, but bleeding with red at the edges. Predator's eyes. She should have been afraid. She wasn't, Elara. His voice was rough, strained. I need to stop. Do you understand? She nodded slowly, thoughts moving through syrup. Kaylin lifted her wrist to his mouth again, but this time he only pressed his lips to the wounds. She felt a tingling sensation, then nothing. When he pulled back, the bite marks were gone, healed completely, leaving only the faintest silver scar. How do you feel? He asked. Like I'm made of clouds. The words came out dreamy, distant. Is it always like that? For you? Yes. The venom affects humans differently. He rose carefully, retrieving a blanket from the chair and draping it around her shoulders. For me, it's sustenance, relief. Your blood is remarkably potent. Is that good? It's dangerous. He moved to the decanter and poured her water, not brandy. Here, drink. Elara obeyed, and the cool liquid helped ground her slightly. She watched him over the rim of the glass the way he stood, with careful distance between them, the tension in his shoulders. You're afraid of me, she said suddenly. He turned, startled. What? Not afraid of me. Afraid for me. Understanding, crystallized through the You think you'll hurt me? Kaylin's jaw tightened. I could, very easily, but you won't. Elara set down the glass and stood, swaying slightly. He was beside her in an instant, steadying her. You won't because the bond won't let you. And because you're not the monster you pretend to be. You don't know what I am, he said quietly. But his hands remained gentle on her arms. Then show me. The words came from somewhere deep and reckless. Stop hiding behind rules and distance. Show me who you really are. For a long moment, they stood frozen or dizzy and brave, him torn between restraint and something else, something hungry. Then he stepped back, breaking contact. You're intoxicated, he said firmly. The venom is clouding your judgment. Tomorrow, when you're clear-headed, we'll talk. He guided her to the settee, helping her lie down. Rest now. Seraphine will check on you in an hour. Kaylin, rest. His voice was gentle but implacable. Please, he covered her with another blanket, and the weight of it plus the venom pulled her toward sleep. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was his face, silver eyes back to normal, expression unreadable, but not unkind. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me. Then darkness took her, warm and complete. When she woke hours later, dawn light was creeping through the windows. And on the table beside her sat a single white rose with a note, in elegant script. You were right. I am afraid, not of hurting you, but of what it means that I don't want to. C.Elara held the note to her chest and felt something shift irrevocably in her heart. Chapter 8. Rival houses. Elara woke to shouting. She bolted upright, her head still fuzzy from the previous night's feeding. The white rose lay crushed against her chest. Kaelin's note crumpled in her fist. Outside her window, the morning sun blazed, but the commotion was coming from somewhere inside the hall. Margaret burst through the door, her face pale. "Miss, my lady, you need to dress, quickly. There are visitors." "What kind of visitors?" Ilara was already moving, shrugging out of her wrinkled gown. "Vampires, from House Ravencross." Margaret's hands shook as she pulled a day dress from the wardrobe. "Seraphine sent me to wake you," she says, her voice dropped to a whisper. "She says they've come to challenge Lord Blackthorn's claim." Ice flooded Ilara's veins. "Challenge what claim?" "You, my lady. They say the marriage contract isn't valid." The entrance hall was a study in barely contained violence. 5 vampires stood in a semicircle near the doors, all dressed in the deep crimson and black of House Raven. At their center was a woman who could have been carved from pale marble, sharp cheekbones, raven black hair swept up in an elaborate style, eyes like chips of amber, beautiful and cold as winter frost. She was staring at Kaelin with open contempt. He stood at the base of the grand staircase, flanked by Seraphine and 2 guards Ilara hadn't met before. His posture was deceptively relaxed, but she could see the coiled tension in his shoulders. He'd dressed formally, full black suit with a high collar, and his silver eyes were flat and merciless. This was the vampire lord the stories spoke of, the Wraith King. "Lady Morgana," Kaelin said, his voice carrying through the hall like frost. "You overstep. Blackthorn Hall is sovereign territory. Your presence here is an act of aggression." The woman Morgana smiled, showing too many teeth. "The treaty allows for diplomatic visits, Lord Blackthorn. Surely you remember. Or has isolation made you forget the niceties? There's nothing diplomatic about arriving with an armed escort at dawn. No less diplomatic than binding a human bride without notifying the Council of Houses." Morgana's amber eyes gleamed with malice. "Such marriages require approval, Kaelin. You know this. Yet we received no petition, no announcement. One might think you're trying to hide something." "The contract was witnessed and sealed according to the old laws," Seraphine interjected coldly. "House Blackthorn owes the Council no explanations for internal affairs. Internal affairs that affect the balance of power between houses." Morgana's gaze swept the hall, landing on Ilara at the top of the stairs. "Ah, there she is, the infamous bride." Every vampire's attention snapped to Ilara. She forced herself to descend the stairs slowly, steadily. Even as her pulse hammered, Margaret tried to follow, but Ilara shook her head slightly. This was hers to face. Kaelin's eyes found hers. The flash of concern quickly masked, but he said nothing as she reached his side. Morgana studied Ilara, like she was examining a piece of meat. "How delightfully ordinary. Tell me, child, did Lord Blackthorn explain what you've gotten yourself into?" "I'm 19, Ilara said coolly. "Not a child, and yes, I understand the contract perfectly. Do you—" Morgana circled closer, her movements predatory. "Do you understand that human brides of vampire lords are meant to strengthen alliances, to bring wealth, territory, or political advantage?" She stopped directly in front of Ilara. "What exactly do you bring to House Blackthorn, little mortal? Your family has no land, no influence, no resources worth claiming." "She brings herself," Kaelin said quietly, "which is worth more than all your scheming." Morgana's smile turned vicious. "How sentimental. How weak. House Ravencross challenges this union on the grounds of strategic frivolity. Lord Blackthorn has bound himself to a worthless human out of sentiment, which proves he's unfit to hold Northern territory." The hall went deadly silent. "You want war," Kaelin said softly. "Say it plainly. I want what's owed to my house. You've held Northern territory for 2 centuries while refusing every alliance, every marriage proposal, every overture of cooperation. You've made yourself an island, Kaelin, and islands sink." Morgana's voice hardened. "Yield half your territory to House Ravencross, or face judgment before the Council of Houses." "Never. Then we'll take it by force if necessary. The other houses are tired of your isolation, tired of your arrogance." Morgana gestured to her guards. "We'll return in 3 days with a formal challenge. Prepare yourself, Wraith King. This time, you won't fight alone in the shadows." She turned to leave, but Ilara's voice stopped her. "What happens if he wins this challenge?" Morgana looked back, surprised. "Wins, darling. There is no winning. Even if he defeats me in single combat, which is unlikely, House Ravencross has 6 other lords, then House Silvermere will challenge, and House Thorngate after that. They'll bleed him piece by piece until he has nothing left." Her smile was poison. "That's what happens to vampires who refuse to play politics." "Then you're not here for territory," Ilara said, understanding dawning cold and clear. You're here to destroy him. How perceptive. Morgana's amber eyes glittered. House Blackthorn has been a thorn in our collective sides for far too long. Your husband chose isolation over alliance, and now he'll pay the price. Our marriage strengthens his position, Elara countered. It shows he's willing to connect with the human world, to honor the treaty. Your marriage shows desperation. Morgana's voice cut like glass. A vampire lord reduced to buying brides through debt contracts. It's pathetic, and it makes him vulnerable. She swept toward the door, her guards following. 3 days came. Prepare for war. The doors slammed shut behind them. The silence in the hall was suffocating. Kalen stood motionless, his expression carved from ice. Seraphine and the guards exchanged worried glances. My lord, Seraphine began. Leave us. His voice was empty, hollowed out. All of you. The vampires disappeared immediately. Margaret hesitated until Elara nodded, then fled up the stairs. When they were alone, Kalen finally moved, stalking to the window, his hands clenched into fists. This is my fault, he said quietly. I should have known they'd used you against me. They're using me because I matter to you. Elara approached carefully. That's not weakness, Kalen. It's a liability. He turned, and for the first time, she saw real fear in his silver eyes. Do you understand what's coming? House Ravencross doesn't make idle threats. They'll bring war to my doorstep, and you'll be caught in the crossfire. Then teach me how to survive it. He stared at her. What? You said the bond protects me from other vampires, that they can't harm me without declaring war on you. Elara lifted her chin. Then use that, make me into something they can't dismiss. Show them I'm not just some desperate human. You bought time your partner. Elara, you don't know what you're asking. Vampire politics are vicious. They'll try to break you just to prove they can. Let them try. Her voice steadied. I didn't survive 19 years of poverty and grief just to hide in a tower while you fight alone. If this is my life now, then I'm going to live it. On my terms. Kalen crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. You could die. Morgana plays to win, and she doesn't care about collateral damage. Then we'll win together. Elara placed her hands over his. You said you were lonely, that you wanted someone who saw you as you are. Well, I see you, and I'm not leaving. His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for fear, finding only determination. You're extraordinary, he whispered, and terrifying. Good, maybe that will keep your enemies guessing. A sound escaped him, not quite a laugh, but close. He pulled her into an embrace, his arms solid and cold around her. 3 days, he murmured against her hair. We have 3 days to prepare. Then let's not waste them. He pulled back slightly, looking down at her with something almost like hope. You're certain, once we start this, there's no backing down. Elara thought of her family, safe because of her sacrifice. She thought of Thomas in the conservatory, choosing this life. She thought of Kalen's loneliness, his careful rules, his fear of hurting her. She thought of the white rose and the note that admitted his vulnerability. I'm certain, she said. Teach me everything. His smile was sharp and dangerous and genuine. Then, let's give House Ravencross a war they'll never forget. Chapter 9, Preparation. The war room was hidden in the lower levels of Blackthorn Hall, a circular chamber with stone walls covered in maps, strategy diagrams, and portraits of vampire lords both living and dead. Kalen stood at the central table, his hands braced on either side of a detailed map of the Northern Territory. Elara had never seen him look so focused, so dangerous. This wasn't the careful, restrained lord who asked permission before feeding. This was the Wraith King who'd survived the Blood Wars. House Ravencross controls the Eastern Docklands, he said without preamble. They've had their eyes on my shipping routes for decades. House Silvermere holds the southern forests. They're neutral for now, but Morgana will try to sway them. His finger traced lines across the map. House Thorngate manages the western mining operations, smaller, but wealthy and vindictive. Elara studied the map, absorbing the geography of power she'd never known existed. And House Blackthorn. We hold the north, the old estates, the trade roads to the capital, and the manufacturing districts. He looked up, silver eyes meeting hers. We're the strongest single house, but if the others unite against us, we'll fall, so we prevent them from uniting. Exactly. Kalen straightened. In 3 days Morgana will issue a formal challenge before the Council of Houses. She argued that I'm unfit to hold territory, that my isolation and frivolous marriage prove I've lost my strategic mind. His voice turned cold. We need to prove her wrong. Seraphine entered carrying a leather-bound ledger. The invitations have been sent. We'll host a formal reception tomorrow night. Every house lord in the territory will attend. Ilara's stomach dropped. A reception, in the middle of a challenge. Politics, my lady. Seraphine set the ledger on the table. Lord Blackthorn will demonstrate that House Blackthorn is strong, confident, and fully engaged with vampire society. And you, she fixed Ilara with a sharp look, you will prove that this marriage is strategic, not sentimental. Kaelin moved around the table to stand beside her, by showing the other houses that you understand our world, that you're not prey, not a pet, but a partner with value. He paused. Can you lie convincingly? She thought of the years she'd smiled through her family's poverty. Assured creditors they'd pay soon, pretended everything was fine while her world crumbled. Yes, I can lie. Good, because tomorrow night, we'll need to sell the greatest lie of all, that our marriage was calculated from the beginning, that I chose you deliberately for reasons that benefit House Blackthorn. Understanding dawned. You want them to think I'm more than I appear. I want them to fear what you might be. Kaelin's voice dropped. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Uncertainty is a weapon, and we'll use it. The next 24 hours were brutal. Seraphine drilled Ilara on vampire etiquette, how to address each house lord, the complex hierarchy of bows and curtsies, which topics were safe and which would start feuds. She learned that House Silvermere valued honor above all, that House Thorngate respected cunning, that House Ravencross only understood strength. Never show fear, Seraphine instructed. Vampires can smell it, literally. Keep your heartbeat steady. Don't fidget. Make eye contact. But don't stare, that's a challenge. Everything is a challenge, Ilara said, exhausted. Welcome to vampire politics. Kaelin taught her the history of the house's centuries of alliances and betrayals, blood feuds that had never been resolved, the careful balance of power that kept them from open war. He showed her how to read a room, identify allies and enemies, spot when someone was lying. Watch their hands, he said, demonstrating. Vampires who've lived centuries learn perfect control of their faces, but hands still give them away. He curled his fingers slightly. Tension here means aggression. Open palms mean negotiation. Hands behind the back, they're hiding something. Ilara practiced until her head spun with information. But the hardest lesson came late that night, when Kaelin took her to the training yard behind the hall. You need to know how to defend yourself, he said, handing her a silver knife, the same one from the Blood Oath. If something goes wrong tomorrow, if anyone tries to harm you, the bond protects me. You said the bond makes harming you an act of war. Yes, but it doesn't make you invincible. His expression was grim. Some vampires might decide you're worth the risk, especially if they think killing you will break me. Fear crawled up Ilara's spine. Would it break you? Kaelin was silent for too long. Yes, he finally said. It would. The admission hung between them, raw and dangerous. He moved behind her, adjusting her grip on the knife. His hands covered hers, cold and steady. Silver weakens us. Not fatally, but enough to slow us down. If a vampire attacks, go for the eyes or throat. Don't hesitate. Don't show mercy. I've never hurt anyone. Then pray you never have to. His breath was cool against her ear. But if it comes to that, if it's your life or theirs, choose yourself. Always. They practiced until dawn touched the horizon. Ilara's hands were blistered, her arms aching, but she could hold the knife without shaking now, could imagine using it if she had to. Kaelin walked her back to her rooms as the sun rose. He looked tired, more human than she'd ever seen him. Get some rest, he said at her door. Tonight will test us both, Kaelin. She caught his hand before he could leave. Thank you for trusting me with this. He looked down at their joined hands, her small and warm, his large and cold. I should be thanking you for not running when you had the chance. Where would I go? Ilara asked softly. Everything I am now is here, with you. His silver eyes widened slightly, something vulnerable flickering across his face. For a moment, she thought he might kiss. His gaze dropped to her lips, then away. Rest, he repeated, voice rough. I'll wake you when it's time to dress. He disappeared down the corridor, moving too fast for human eyes to track. Ilara touched her lips, wondering what it would feel like to kiss someone without warmth. Evening came too quickly. Margaret helped her into a gown that took Ilara's breath away. Midnight blue silk with silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. The neckline was modest but elegant, the sleeves long and fitted. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style, secured with silver pins. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. You look like a queen, miss, Margaret whispered. I feel like an imposter. Then be the best imposter they've ever seen. A knock sounded. Kaelin entered, already dressed in formal blacks with a silver chain at his throat. He stopped when he saw her, his expression arrested. "You're beautiful," he said quietly. "I'm terrified." "Good, so am I." He offered his arm. "But we'll face them together." Ilara placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine fabric. "What happens if we fail?" "We won't." His voice was absolute, "because I refuse to lose you to their politics." They descended the stairs together, toward the great hall where every vampire lord in the territory waited. The doors opened. Music spilled out, haunting and beautiful. Inside, the hall had been transformed. Candles everywhere, reflecting off polished marble and crystal. Vampires in elegant dress moved through the space like dangerous dancers. And at the center, watching their entrance with predatory focus, stood Lady Morgana Ravencross. She smiled, showing teeth. Kaelin's grip on Ilara's hand tightened fractionally. Then he led her forward, into the den of wolves. "Smile," he murmured, "and remember you're the most dangerous thing in this room, because of the bond, because they don't know what you're capable of." His voice dropped lower. "Neither do I, and that's what terrifies them." Ilara lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and smiled. Let them wonder, let them fear. She was Lady Blackthorn now, and she would not break. The reception began. Chapter 10. The choice. The great hall glittered with predators dressed as nobility. Ilara had thought she understood what vampires were, had seen Kaelin's restraint, Seraphine's efficiency, Thomas's casual acceptance, but this gathering revealed the truth. Vampires were apex predators playing at civilization, and the veneer was gossamer earthen. Every conversation was a negotiation, every smile hid calculation, and every set of inhuman eyes tracked her movement through the room. Kaelin kept her close, his hand a steady presence at the small of her back. They moved through the crowd like dancers, greeting each house lord with perfect courtesy. Lord Silvermere was tall and severe, with white blonde hair and eyes like Arctic ice. "Lady Blackthorn," he said, bowing precisely. "An unexpected pleasure. We'd heard Lord Blackthorn had taken a bride, but the rumors did you know justice." "How kind," Ilara replied, her voice steady. "Though I find rumors rarely capture truth, don't you?" Something almost like approval flickered across his face. "Indeed, perhaps House Blackthorn is wiser than we credited." They moved on. House Thorngate's lord was shorter, stockier, with copper-colored eyes that missed nothing. "A bold move, Kaelin," he said bluntly, "binding yourself to a mortal in these times. Some might call it weakness, and some might call it strategy." Kaelin replied coolly, "Human alliances are the future. Thorngate, those who ignore that will find themselves obsolete. We'll see." But Thorngate's gaze lingered on Ilara with speculation. Lady Morgana waited at the far end of the hall, holding court like a dark queen. Her crimson gown matched her house colors, cut to display power rather than modesty. When Ilara and Kaelin approached, the conversations around them died. "How domestic," Morgana purred. "Playing house with your little mortal. Does she warm your bed as well as she signs contracts?" The insult was deliberate, designed to provoke. Kaelin's expression didn't change, but Ilara felt tension coil through him. Before he could respond, she spoke. "Lady Ravencross," she said with perfect courtesy, "I'd heard your house valued strength above all else, yet here you are, attempting to wound through gossip rather than action. How disappointing." The hall went silent. Morgana's amber eyes narrowed to slits. "Careful, little mortal. You're protected by bond law, but accidents happen. Do they?" Ilara tilted her head, "Because I was under the impression that harming me would constitute an act of war against House Blackthorn. Unless House Ravencross is ready to face those consequences, perhaps we are." Morgana's smile was venomous. "Perhaps we're tired of Blackthorn arrogance, tired of watching Kaelin play hermit, while the rest of us maintain the delicate balance that keeps our world from chaos." "Then make your challenge formal," Kaelin said quietly, "but leave her out of it. Why, she's your weakness now." Morgana circled them slowly. "For centuries, you've been untouchable. No family to thread, no companions to leverage, just you and your cold halls." She stopped in front of Ilara. "But now you've given us the perfect target." Fear spiked through Ilara's chest, but she forced it down. "Don't show weakness. Vampires can smell it." "You assume I'm a target," she said steadily. "That's your first mistake." Morgana laughed, sharp and cruel. Bold words for someone who could snap like kindling. Perhaps. Ilara met her gaze without flinching. "But you're forgetting something important. I chose this. I walked into Blackthorn Hall knowing what waited for me. I signed that contract in blood. I bound myself to this house and this lord of my own free will." She stepped closer, voice dropping. "Can you say the same? Or were you born into your power, Lady Did you ever have to choose? The question landed like a blade. Morgana's expression twisted. You think choice makes you special. You're property, girl. A bargaining chip dressed in silk. And you're terrified, Ilara said softly. Terrified that a human might understand vampire politics better than you expected. Terrified that Kaelin isn't as isolated as you thought. Terrified that your careful plans are unraveling. Enough. Morgana's voice cracked like a whip. She turned to address the assembled lords. I call for formal judgment. House Blackthorn has violated council protocol by binding a human bride without petition. One challenge Lord Blackthorn's right to hold Northern Territory on grounds of strategic incompetence. The hall erupted in whispers. Kaelin's hand found Ilara's, squeezing once. Then he stepped forward. I accept your challenge, Morgana, but I propose alternative terms. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, single combat would solve nothing. We both know that. Win or lose, the other houses will continue circling. His voice carried through the hall. Instead, I propose a test of alliance. Give me 30 days to prove that House Blackthorn's human connections strengthen our position rather than weaken it. If I succeed, House Ravencross withdraws all territorial claims. If I fail, he paused, I'll cede half the Northern Territory as you demanded. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was a massive gamble. Morgana's eyes glittered. And how exactly will you prove this? The human shipping routes my wife's family controls will be open to all houses under Blackthorn protection. The manufacturing districts will see increased production through human labor reforms. And he glanced at Ilara. House Blackthorn will host the annual treaty celebration this year, demonstrating our commitment to human-vampire cooperation. Lord Silvermere stepped forward. A bold proposal. But what guarantee do we have that you'll honor these terms? My word, Kaelin said simply. And my bond to my wife. She's human. She has no reason to support vampire interests unless I prove they align with human welfare. She's my accountability. Ilara's breath caught. He was making her a bridge between worlds, not property, but partner. Morgana's expression turned calculating. 30 days. But if you fail, Kaelin, I want more than territory. I want your admission that isolation was weakness, that you need us. Agreed. Kaelin's voice was steady. Do we have council approval? The assembled lords exchanged glances. Finally, Lord Silvermere nodded. House Silvermere supports this test. Better to measure strength through action than blood. House Thorngate agrees. The copper-eyed lord added, though we'll be watching closely. One by one, the other houses signaled approval. Morgana's jaw tightened. But she nodded. 30 days then. Don't disappoint us, Wraith King. She swept from the hall, her entourage following. The tension broke. Conversations resumed, though every vampire's attention remained fixed on Ilara and Kaelin. You just bet everything on me, Ilara whispered. No, Kaelin said quietly. I bet everything on us. Hours later, when the last guests had departed and the hall stood empty, Kaelin led Ilara to the glass tower. The city spread below them, lights twinkling in the darkness. Dawn was still hours away. I'm sorry, he said finally. I put you in danger tonight, made you a target. You made me matter, Ilara corrected. There's a difference. He turned to face her, silver eyes searching hers. 30 days, Ilara, can we do this? We can try. She moved closer. But I need to know something first. Anything. When this is over, when we've proven ourselves to the other houses, what then? She took a breath. Do I stay human? Do I grow old while you remain frozen? Or... She couldn't finish the question. Understanding dawned in his expression. Are you asking if I'd turn you? I'm asking what future we have, if any. Her voice dropped to a whisper, because somewhere in the last few days, this stopped being just a contract for me. Kaelin closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. Ilara, you don't have to answer now, she said quickly. I just needed you to know that I'm not here out of obligation anymore. I'm here because... She met his gaze. Because when I think about leaving, about going back to my old life, I can't breathe. You've become essential. And I don't know what to do with that. He cupped her face in his cold hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks. I've lived 300 years, he said softly. I've loved and lost. I've watched everyone I cared for fade to dust. And I swore I'd never let myself feel that again. His eyes shone with something almost like tears. But you, God help me. Ilara, you make me want to try, want to hope, want to believe that maybe this time, it could be different. Then let it be different, she whispered. Choose me, not because of contracts or politics or strategy. Choose me because you want to. I do. The words were raw, honest. I want you more than I've wanted anything in a century. That terrifies me. Good, Ilara said. echoing his words from days ago. Fear means it matters. She rose on her toes, closing the distance between them. His lips were cold against hers, but gentle, so gentle it made her chest ache. The kiss was brief, chaste, but it held a promise of something more, something worth fighting for. When they pulled apart, Kalen rested his forehead against hers. 30 days, he murmured, and then if you still want this, want me, we'll figure out the rest together. Together, Ilara agreed. Below them, the city slept. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient dance, and in the glass tower of Blackthorn Hall, a vampire lord and his human bride stood together at the edge of dawn, not knowing what the future held, but choosing to face it as one. The real story was just beginning.